Hey, Max or Maximilian?
Max is totally fine.
So what was your first computer?
So my first computer was a Fujitsu Siemens Scaleo, I think back then it was called. I think it was in 2004. And I think it was Pentium 4 processor, 1 gigabyte of RAM. And yeah, I think I got that for Christmas back then.
I remember the Siemens Fujitsu line. I forgot about the Scaleo. Okay. What is your first action with the computer?
I think I used it mostly for playing video games. So I think Age of Empires 2, I think, was one of the first ones. And I did a lot of messaging back then with my friends, like ICQ, MSN Messenger, those kind of things. So, but yeah, very early on I did like computer games. But then I have to admit that the computer world quickly lost me a bit to the console world. So I was heavily doing Xbox back then during my teenager days.
Okay. And what games did you prefer back then?
I played mostly Halo back then, Halo 2, Gears of War a bit later, and then I almost played, like I would say, semi-professionally, Call of Duty 4 back then. So it was still very early days, right? There was no things such as Twitch or anything where you did like a lot of streaming or something back then. So we played like a couple of tournaments and those kind of things. So yeah, Call of Duty 4, Halo, that was my area back then.
What means semi-professionally?
So semi-professionally, I would say. So so there was no like big kind of, as I said, like streaming income or anything like that. But we got a few sponsors back then. It was not like that I could live from it, obviously, but we had like a team. We were in different kind of leagues back then, active. We were like recording videos of that. We were going to tournaments, those kind of things.
Okay, and I have no idea how it works. So leagues means there are like official leagues, so you can...
Yeah, that was like an online league, so to say, right? Where you had like different kind of types, like 4-on-4 or 2 versus 2 or 1-on-1s, for example. And then you earned points when you played different teams, and then you played that online. And then when it was like a German, I think, console league, it was called back then, and some international kind of leagues. And there we played against other teams, and then you earned points and you climbed up the ladder.
And was the league part of the game, or was it external portal?
It was an external portal, super manual process. You had to upload even screenshots of the results of the game. So it was, as I said, it was like 2006, 2007, something like that.
What I remember, I think I already told it on the podcast. Back then, I remember everyone wanted to play a game. It was from the company called Crytec. I forgot the name of the game. It was the one, really, it was like shooting game, but it was a really high fidelity graphics. And it was everyone, I think it was 2008, 9, 10, or 6, something like this.
Yeah.
Cryo, you remember that?
No, I don't, actually. So that was just the publisher, or was that the name of the
Crytec
game?
is the company.
Yeah.
And the name of the game, wait a sec, I have to research quickly. Crytec game. Crytec was not Cryotech. Crytec was the company, and they made the Cry engine, it seems like, and Crysis, I think it was.
Crysis. Yeah. I'm not 100% sure if I recall it. No,
So Crysis was like you were a soldier or warrior or something, and you had to shoot a lot to accomplish the task. You had to go in one direction and solve problems. Crytek was the thing, and Crysis. And regardless, and I had no interest in gaming back then, but everyone told me I have to try it out, and then I would change my mind. So I installed the Crysis on my machine, and the cool story is I had a look at this and I said, okay, I would like to win. And what I did, it was like the most peaceful, I think, game of all times. I just ran in one direction without shooting, and after I think 1 hour I was done. I just only remember I had to shoot at the end because it was like a very huge something which I had to kill. But and everyone is surprised. This was like on Friday, and on Monday went back. It's like, okay, I'm done with the game. And they say, how it's possible? It's like, I just I accomplished all the missions. And they say, okay, this is you never played. And no, I just did it, right? And
so you played a shooter without shooting.
Yeah,
actually.
we were just running. So for me, it was like a marathon. and if someone wanted to shoot at me, I quickly ran. I had to swim, and it was possible. Sometimes I was killed, so I did it again. But it was the fastest way to win the game. And they say, okay, you completely missed the points. Like, why? I won, and you didn't, right? So and then I said, okay, I deinstalled the game. But what I remember back then, the graphics were amazing. The crytec.
Yes.
So it was like, I think it was 2006 even. It was amazing. And I look at YouTube recently, and it still looks nice. So you have to take a look at the what I said, crysis from crytek. Exactly.
Okay, yeah, I need to take a look. But with the graphics, it's mostly, I think back then everything also looked amazing. And sometimes if I go back and I take a look at the old games like GTA, like Vice City or something like that, it looks like, I mean, obviously standards have changed a lot, right? So things that looked pretty awesome back then now look, kind of interesting after a couple of years.
I also played semi-professionally, the game, because I was in two days, I won everything, and I was better than all my colleagues back then in a project who play all the time and couldn't solve the problems there in the game.
Yeah, definitely.
So maybe I could, the next time support you in your league with.
Yes, I mean I quit gaming a couple of years back, but
okay,
if I will do a revival, we can be a team.
What happened that you started, to do something different than gaming with the computer?
I remember it quite well. So there was a friend of mine, and he did like some very small like HTML pages actually back then, and he just changed like a cover. And I think there was a tag called Marquee or something where you can animate like a headline or something that is like goes like up and down or something.
Marquee is still work. Yeah. If you go to Chrome and you add Marquee tag, it just works with the attributes. It's amazing. Blink doesn't work anymore, but Marquee was the thing.
Yeah, but I think it's deprecated, right? At least its marker is deprecated right now.
It is deprecated, but still worked. So this was my gag, in the conferences sometimes. Like, you don't need CSS, you can just use Marquee and everyone,
Exactly. And he showed me this, and I was kind of amazed that you just have this text file, and then you see something visually working actually, right? So I started doing like very small like HTML stuff, so nothing really fancy. And in the school, we had like it was like the 9th year, so to say, and there was like a focus area that you could pick, which was IT back then, and there we did also, but just very simple like web pages, and I think very easy programs back then. And with and I was quite attached to it, and then I was 15 and I decided to actually quit school and start an apprenticeship as an application developer back then. So in German, it's like Anwendungsentwicklung.
Okay.
There's like an apprenticeship that goes like 3 to 4 years, where you go to a company and you learn like programming, and you go to a school where you have like the theoretical part.
Is it in Germany, in German, Berufsschule?
Yeah, exactly. Berufsschule. Okay. So it's like a Lehrberuf, right? Oder Ausbildung.
Okay.
So that's the apprenticeship kind of concept. And there I started doing my very first developments in, it was back then with Delphi, so Object Pascal. So that was essentially my starting point. So
you like that?
Back then it was amazing because I used a lot of the VCL, right? The Visual Component Library. So like I dragged a button and it was just there, and I double clicked and I could execute, have some code, and then I have an exit that I could ship to the customer. So for me that was really a good entry point to start programming back then.
I started with actually basic, but then Turbo Pascal, and I really wanted to learn Delphi, but then I never managed to do this. But I think Delphi is still amazing because I know lots of developers who still believe in Delphi, so this is why.
Yeah, I think this first like WYSIWYG kind of editor things that really was a good entry point. So I created rich Windows application back then, and did also a lot of report. It's also a thing called Report Builder, where you can build like nice visual reports where you can do some statistics and stuff. So I did a lot of SQL queries retrieving data for the property management companies that was back then.
Berufsschule is more like profession school, if you directly translate it. That's interesting. What you learned there? You learned Delphi still and the entire time, or?
Yes. So actually, I did like in the apprenticeship, I did basically Delphi, Object Pascal, only. And I have to admit, back then it was very early stage, so I was 15 at that time, and it was very procedural, right? So I did like in the button click handler, I put like all the code and stuff.
Sure.
So I was really trying out new stuff. But that was it for the first 3 to 4 years.
And then what happens afterwards?
I decided to leave the company because sometimes I have the feeling if you are an apprentice or in a company, you will always be the apprentice no matter what.
Yep.
So I decided to leave that, and I went to another company that was called Waldhard Software back then, which was like a small company providing software for ski schools all over the world. Because I was based back then I'm still again in Austria. So obviously the ski market is very, very popular here. So I developed there also then in the first years in Delphi, we developed like a ski school software for a lot of companies in DACH area and also international.
Oh, and where were you based in Austria? Salzburg, Linz, or
No,
Vienna?
so right now I'm based in Innsbruck, and that was also very close to Innsbruck back then. It was near Telfs-Pfaffenhofen. It's like a smaller town.
Hey, nice.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, there I did also Delphi for a couple of years, and then we started also creating like web shops around it. And there I then also started my first kind of Java development efforts.
Why Java and not PHP or Cold Fusion back then or whatever it was?
I think it worked nicely because of the API development back then. So it was very early stage for me, also still in Java development, and the company got a few new lead developers who decided to use that stack. I think a majority also was still developed in Python, but some smaller modules and APIs then were developed in Java. But my real, let's say, Java career, I would say, started then after also this company, where I really started doing a lot of Spring application development back then.
And in another company or freelancer, or what was the?
It was another company. It was called Catalyst back then. It's now called Cloudflight. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. They have the headquarters in Linz back then. And yeah, there we did a lot of, I would call it like a software fabric. So we did a lot of development for other companies. So it was like project based. So we had like always like a 2-3 month kind of project where you develop like a different kind of use case, and was very heavily using Spring back then. And there started my kind of API development.
And you like Java?
Yes, I liked
From the beginning.
From the beginning, yeah. There was like a moment in time where I told you when I started with this procedural kind of thing with Delphi and putting things in the on-click handler. And remember when I went to there was like a Delphi code camp at some point, and there was a guy doing a presentation around clean code, and it clicked somehow for me. And I ordered like the book also clean code, and I really dove into it. And I said, okay, this now changed my whole perception on how I develop software. And then I think most of the examples were in Java also. So I tried that out, and I started like to adopting like design patterns, trying some different things. And then for me, Java fit like a very great and natural fit back then.
Yeah, very good. So so you are no more at Cloudflight or Catalyst. So what happens after Catalyst?
Yeah, so I actually moved to Berlin back then because my wife got a job at the Austrian embassy there, and I decided to move with her. And then I realized quickly that in Berlin it's a very great market for software developers, software engineers back then. And I started at a company called Ada Health. They're doing like a symptom checking app. It's like quite popular in the App Store back then, and I did like Java backend development with a small team. But yeah, after a year, I moved to Zalando then.
Zalando?
Actually. Yes, exactly. And there I was also a backend engineer, then Java team lead. So I did a lot of API development, still same stack most of the time, still Spring. And first kind of touch points then also with cloud and AWS, and I was actually quite happy at that time there.
As a developer at Zalando. Zalando, you were happy.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Which time frame we are talking about? So in Innsbruck, if you left Innsbruck was 2010, 12? Or
Oh, no. So I think, so I left Innsbruck in 2018 or 19, I think.
Okay.
So a couple of years ago. And then I moved to Berlin. Yeah, I think, 2019. And there I've been 3 years. And now I actually recently moved back to Innsbruck.
What do you like? What do you prefer better, Berlin or Innsbruck?
That's a tough question. It's like two very different kind of things. Obviously, I really like Berlin and I really like going back there, but I really like the life in the mountains, to be honest. So it's really because I'm also like traveling a lot, also to like conferences nowadays, and it's really a different feeling coming back to the mountains, going hiking, have like really silent around you, than going back in this big city of Berlin. But obviously, from a cultural perspective, I really enjoyed like they're going to like theaters and stuff like that, right? So this is kind of what I miss. But yeah, Innsbruck is really great from the surroundings, and I have 2 very small kids, and all the grandmas and stuff are here, so it's really great for them to grow up here in this kind of area. Yeah.
What I like in Berlin is not Berlin itself, rather than the area outside of Berlin.
Oh.
This is what I really prefer. There are lots of lakes, so there are woods, lakes, so it's amazing. Berlin, okay, is just big city. And what I like in Innsbruck is this really crazy city, because you are in the city and you look at the mountains, and in the how it's called, ski jumping, device.
Yeah, exactly.
and this is like, if you look, this is it looks incredible, and the city is not too big, but it's really nice. And Innsbruck is completely different than other Austrian city, I would even say, right?
It is. So the cool thing is, right, we have a very big university here. So so a lot of people also from Germany come here, and therefore we also have a lot of like different restaurants, right? So people are doing also a lot of cultural events here. We have also a theater. So it's a very good actually place to be in Innsbruck. So it's probably also my favorite place in Austria. I mean, Vienna is also amazing, but
Salzburg is also nice.
Salzburg is also is also nice. Yeah,
Linz actually as well. So it is Vienna is different. So Linz also, the outer area of Linz is great. Salzburg itself is perfect. Yeah. Vienna the same. Exactly. This is hard to tell, because Vienna you could go, and the Danube and the river is also nice. So
true. Yeah, what I like at Innsbruck is you're very fast in Italy. You're very fast in Munich. And you're very fast also in Switzerland.
Munich is like, true, yeah.
Yeah, like 1.5 hours, right? Sometimes I go to our Munich office right now, and there it just takes me 1.5 hours by train, so it's very easy.
About Innsbruck, I spent some time in a project, and there's a team which works for the Tyrolean government, I think, and they created, with Java, the entire maintenance and the entire portal for the government. And what I like the most, this is a small motivated team which works for the government, and they're incredibly productive. This is the interesting part, and they have fun, and they are also in Innsbruck, so this is why I know Innsbruck a bit. Cool. And okay, so what happened then? So you quit Zalando, or what happened?
Yeah, so as I said, I was actually quite happy at Zalando, and I thought I will probably stay there also for the next couple of years. But then, AWS knocked at the door and basically asked if I would be keen on doing it, and to become a solution architect, actually.
But how they knew you, or how it happened? How the
they reached out to me on LinkedIn. I think it was some kind of a recruiter that reached out to me. So we had like a phone call, and there are multiple steps, right, in the hiring process at AWS. And so I prepared quite a lot for that, and it seemed like a very appealing company for me there. So I decided to give it a try, and then eventually I ended up there being a solution architect. So then I basically switched a bit from being a full-time like software engineer a bit to the solution architecture role, which was also a step in my career that I wanted to do.
Is the hiring process hard?
Compared to what I've experienced before, I would say yes. So I prepared really like a couple of days or even weeks for like a single stage, for example, like system design, those kind of things. So I really took a lot of effort.
Like algorithms, or what you learned, or
a system design, also mostly like scaling architectures and and things like monolith to microservice transformation, right? Pros and cons, those kind of things,
okay.
and the different kind of databases when you pick what. So it was more like in the system design,
Okay.
so to say,
Architecture
area.
almost, right? So
Yeah.
enterprise architecture.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and what you did in AWS, I mean, what means solution architect? So I always know there are so many solution architects. Somewhere there should be problem architects as well. Otherwise, otherwise it wouldn't work. So
Yeah, so as a solution architect, essentially, so I'm focused on SaaS companies right now, for example, in the DACH area. So I'm helping them on their cloud journey, right? That sounds a bit broad now in the beginning. So, but what that means is I do a lot of architectural reviews. So you can imagine there's a company saying, hey, we want to build a system for X. How can we do that? This is our proposal. And then I look at the proposal, for example, and I say, okay, you can optimize this, you can optimize that. I think for this kind of use case, it would be better if you build it like this. I also do like a small POC sometimes, right? I create a lot of reference repositories then to show an actual example implementation. And I'm also specializing quite a lot on serverless right now. And I'm leveraging there the skills that I got from the field back then, my Java knowledge, and I combined that now a lot with serverless. So that's why I also I'm the creator of the AWS Java on AWS Lambda workshop. That I developed with a couple of colleagues, and there I now also go on conferences and run those workshops and show how you can get the best out of Java in the serverless world. So, and I also write blogs about it. So yeah, so it's like a variety of topics that I deal with.
this I didn't even knew. So was it your idea to do this, or you were asked by AWS, we do more Java now, or what was the?
No, so it was an idea from me and my colleagues. So when I did this specialization on serverless, I had like a mentor, Christian Müller, who was really also engaged in the Java space. And he said, we don't really have any content on how effectively using Java basically in the serverless world and show all the optimizations that we know. I said, okay, let's create this workshop. And then we started developing it. We started with a first module that shows you how to migrate the traditional Spring Boot application to AWS Lambda. What are the caveats and the things that you need to care about? There are a lot of things that you need to think about. And then we developed it. We did like a first run at the Java conference in Barcelona last year. And we had it also at DevOps Belgium then in I think October it was, and at reInvent. And we really we got great feedback also from the customers and the participants that this was exactly what they were looking for. So yeah, we saw like there's a missing piece of content that we need to fill, and that there's guidance needed. A lot of people want to use Java on serverless, so that's why we came up with this idea.
Exactly. This is I'm not using Spring Boot at all in my projects, but I'm using more Quarkus and from the Java space. And what's really happened last week again. So what I showed that you can actually take the old code and package this as with Quarkus and run it as AWS Lambda. And the great benefit is if you do it publicly with public IP address, is very simple because you can have API gateway, in some cases the load balancer.
Exactly.
And you don't have to care about IP addresses, security groups, and nothing. And this changed, for instance, the direction of the project. If they saw this, it's okay, we didn't do this, and why there is no documentation. And I say, I have no idea, but this is what I'm doing for years. So this is why I ask you. And even better in Java, I do full stack Java. So I'm using CDK with Java, and in a project I have this CDK as infrastructure as code and the business code in one Maven project. Well, actually two Maven projects, and developers know Maven, right? So and if you have that, what you can do, you can create reusable infrastructure as code patterns. So you can create a construct, with your Lambda and API gateway and SnapStart and everything is already prepared. Then create a jar and submit it, for instance, to your Maven Nexus repository or in current project in S3. And then you can check it out and reuse it, or in S3, download it and run it in a CI/CD, for instance, code build pipeline, and you have your environment. And this is frictionless. and fast, and it works really, really good. So I was really also I asked myself, why there is no content on AWS? I mean, there are clients and customers waiting for it, and it's completely ignored. So okay, I don't know. I show it a little bit, and since then I have lots of projects who are asking me, "No, do this for us." So it's actually a great story.
Yeah, I mean, it's also great feedback, right? To receive, and yeah, we saw this kind of gap, and since then we try to create more and more Java content, especially for serverless. There are a few blog posts that I have published also, and I think Mark Sales, you also had at the podcast, he also is doing a lot in the Java space to really get that content out and provide Java samples. And yeah, definitely CDK I also really love using, so I also use that for a couple of modules from the workshop, and yeah, I really like it a lot. Yeah.
And but you're also using these serverless, how you call it? SAM.
SAM, yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I wanted to say SAML because I was like, SAML? No, SAM. Serverless application model.
Yeah.
What are the benefits using SAM with Java comparing it with CDK?
Yeah, that's a good question. So sometimes I like the declarative style approach for very simple kind of projects. So I have like a YAML file, I just throw it in there, right, and it's there. So this is so for quite simple projects I use that, and there's also a nice integration with it. So SAM comes in two parts, right? One is the template kind of stuff that you put the infrastructure as code, and there's also SAM CLI where you can do local invoke of a Lambda function, for example, where you can do SAM sync, for example, and retrieve logs from the CloudWatch logs to your console. So it's quite convenient. Instead of going to CloudWatch, I can just do SAM logs and retrieve the logs directly from the CloudWatch for that function. So I use that quite a lot in combination. You can also use CDK in combination with SAM CLI. A lot of people don't know that because it's usually attached to a CloudFormation stack, and CDK does nothing else than leverage CloudFormation at some point, right? So they are actually compatible, so to say. So I would say it depends on your project requirements, what you're more familiar with. Some people like to have like a declarative approach for their infrastructure. They are used to it. There may be even teams or like more the operator kind of folks, right, that really like this YAML style of things. But since a lot of people are we have this kind of mindset that you write it and you build it, you run it, right, and you also provide your infrastructure code. If I'm a Java developer and I write everything in Java, it's also great to write my infrastructure in Java. Obviously. So I would say, as always, as every question in software, it depends. But as a rule of thumb, for more simpler projects where I don't really have this requirement of reusing things a lot, I use SAM, and for other projects, for bigger projects, I use CDK.
Yeah, that's exactly. But the project gets quickly bigger. If you need some certificates, DNS, or then
that's true. Maybe in my environment, because I provide a lot of samples also, right? It's like maybe more like a simple kind of structure. But if I have like a bigger project that I would develop, then probably CDK would be the choice.
Yeah, and what happens in both cases, CDK is more or less like Java to JSON binding. So creating with Java API all the constructs. Some are prepared, some not. This is type safe. So you have a Maven dependency on AWS CDK, which is very well maintained. So you get an update every 2 weeks at least, I would say. And then if you run it, you get a JSON. And the JSON is the declarative state, how it should be. It's submitted to AWS, and AWS does something behind the scenes. And the great story is, why I'm telling this, because I get the questions all the time. And the great story is the state is stored on AWS. So the stack is on AWS. This is not true for the other open source solutions, so we get lots of trouble with it. But if you do it this way, you're just submitting, and this state is reconciled in so-called stack. This is, and the stacks. This is why I usually have multiple stacks, because one stack is the networking, the other one can be the persistence, which depending how often it changes. The change frequency for me is like one of the decision points. Where I'm going with it, because the SAM does almost the same, but they have kind of macros, or which are they can do with one command, they can generate more CloudFormation. but at the end of the day, it's also CloudFormation and Stack, right?
Yes.
With SAM.
Yeah, SAM is just a CloudFormation transform in the end. So it's just a simplified way to write CloudFormation code or CloudFormation YAML, so to say. So if you have I have a presentation somewhere that shows the number of lines you would need in CloudFormation if you do API Gateway Lambda to DynamoDB. And it's really huge, right? Because you need the permissions, right, from Lambda to DynamoDB. So there are a lot of things that you need to define, and SAM basically abstracts that for you, right, to make the very same architecture be available in 20 to 30 lines instead of having hundreds of lines. So it's really just a simplified syntax that is like a template transform that we call it. I recorded a session on AWS SAM with Java last week on our serverless LAN channel, where I talk about Java with AWS SAM, and there we talk about this also in depth.
Exactly. So, and you use a lot of Spring Boot. Why not Quarkus? Because in my projects is or why not? I can imagine why, because Spring Boot from your projects. But I get lots of requests regarding Quarkus, and it starts incredible fast, and Micronaut as well. So there's huge interest there as well. Are you planning to do something there, or is this more Mark's area?
No, so I'm not specifically tied to a framework, so to say. We used that very first example because we saw a lot of our customers also leveraging Spring Boot, and it's a very popular framework, and a lot of people have Spring, that we thought we start with this kind of example to show, right? So that's why we leveraged for the workshop, for the first module, we leveraged the Spring, for example. But all the other modules, if you check, they're actually using plain Java, so there's not there's not even a framework involved at all, because I usually, when I write Lambda function, I actually don't use a framework at all. It depends really on your use case. I also did a couple of things with Quarkus. There were also a recent development of a Quarkus module for the workshop. I'm happy to share that as well.
Yeah.
It really depends on your preferences and what's the stack you are used to. And sometimes you don't even need a framework at all.
Maybe we discuss this a bit, because I think you need a framework a little bit more if you do the synchronous Lambda behind HTTP API gateway. Because this is also a common misunderstanding, because what you can do then is, what a framework does for me, Quarkus for instance, and this is also widely misunderstood, what you get is so Quarkus registers one generic Lambda function handler. This is Quarkus, not yours. And what Quarkus does then, Quarkus gets invoked by AWS runtime, and Quarkus gets an HTTP event, reads all the data, and then invokes your JAX-RS endpoint. So as common misunderstanding, you can have hundreds of endpoints. It doesn't matter.
Yes.
And you say yes, but in projects, they believe you have to ship 100 lambdas to have 100 endpoints. So this is why I'm repeating this here. And so for that, I need a framework for the dispatching. Otherwise, I will have to implement a switch case, which we did at the beginning of Java with the servlet. So that will be terrible code. If you have a framework, the dispatching, the mapping of the HTTP, the routing basically, this mapping of the HTTP data encoded in the event to invocation of the JAX-RS endpoints happens in the framework. And if you have already framework, you get the nice stuff like dependency injection, at inject, and you can use your complete microprofile, in my case, stack. Where I am not using Quarkus at all, plain Pojo, are lambdas, how they should be, event-driven architectures, if they react to sources like SNS, SQS, Kinesis, EventBridge, huge. I use EventBridge a lot. This is really great with Java. And then what I do, I even use the very basic version of Lambda, where I get the stream, input stream, and then immediately use my JSON-B, to decode the stream into JSON object. And one method later, I have a nice interface with my business object, and I don't need. And the only difference is I don't use dependency injection. I just use my old no Java programming with new, and it works great.
Yes.
And this works great because these asynchronous lambdas are a little bit simpler because they understand exactly one type of event usually, and that you don't need huge framework to do it. So in my case, either I use Quarkus for HTTP and it starts really fast, is highly optimized, or I use nothing. So nothing at all is just Pojo.
Yeah, you touched on two interesting points here. So this layer that you mentioned, right, that does the mapping from the HTTP API gateway event to an actual internal request that the framework understands. That's like also a common pitfall, right? That's something that we always explain when we are going like to the conferences, also in the workshop, that it's not like your Lambda sits on port 80 and just waits for an HTTP request, right? But you receive a JSON payload, and this obviously Spring does not like Spring Boot, for example, does not understand by default. So so Quarkus has their own implementation. This is really great. So this is really awesome that you have this built into the framework, and for you as a developer, right, you have your micro profile application, you can do dev development locally, everything is the same, and it comes from the framework. Micronaut does that as well. They also have a similar implementation that does that. Exactly. And they are leveraging, at least from the later version, I think it was 3 something, there we have an open source project called AWS Serverless Java container, which does exactly that, and you can use that for Spring as well. So what it does, it acts as a servlet container, right? It takes the API gateway request object and then transforms it internally. So Quarkus has their own, as far as I saw. I also went through the source code recently, and Micronaut has that. And for Spring, you can use that open source project to do this translation between the API gateway requests.
The GitHub project you are mentioning, this is AWS open source, AWS serverless containers. The interesting part is it also comes with Jersey implementation. And what's interesting, Jersey is Glassfish, Helidon, and all the other servers. So actually you could integrate for free other runtimes as well. So I just I don't understand at all why the Helidon developers are still waiting, because I think if I would have a little bit more time, it will weekend projects to integrate something as a prototypical thing. But actually, what I guess, Quarkus get inspired by this project. Everyone gets inspired by the project. So AWS did it first, and then you have to get the idea. It is not obvious that you can do such a thing. It is simple, but you have to get the idea first. And if you see, of course, how it should be.
True.
And why I like Quarkus, because the problem, if you think about this, is if the JSON object arrives and Quarkus reads the JSON object, Quarkus has to invoke efficiently, the JAX-RS endpoints. And because of this is an extension, Quarkus eliminates reflection, so it is fast. And and this is actually the interesting part. And now it comes in Lambda. If you would like to have more CPU, you have to buy it with RAM. So and if you so my finding is around 1.5 gig. It works the fastest. And you pay, this is very cost effective. So I would say 1.7 gig, 1 gig, you get 1 CPU. But if I get 1 gig of RAM on Quarkus is way too much. So we can do whatever we like. This is like incredible amount of memory actually for Quarkus. The implication is we don't have to run GraalVM with Quarkus. So all my Lambdas are running on stock Corretto, which is great. Our pipeline is faster. We don't have to do the GraalVM transformation process. And if the function remains hot, the cool story is every subsequent invocation gets faster because it gets optimized by Corretto, and we actually actively save money because GraalVM optimizes only once at the beginning. Yeah. And this is why the Quarkus is really extremely well suited for serverless, and of course Micronaut the same story. Micronaut optimizes differently. Quarkus uses extensions, and Micronaut uses compiler processors. This is, I think I always confuse the name. I think it's called the right name is compiler processor. What happens? It generates the code at compile time by standard Java SE plugins, and Quarkus uses extensions, but the outcome is very, very similar. And this makes it so interesting because the developers are assuming that you need GraalVM to have efficient Lambda, and I have to say in all my productions projects we never use actually GraalVM so far, because you could save money with Quarkus without GraalVM. And you don't have, to wait until the the native GraalVM compilation, which can take 2-3 minutes if the project is larger.
Yeah, I think the performance topic is obviously a very big topic in the serverless space. That's also why the workshop that I mentioned really focuses on performance optimizations. And we have a couple of options here. And I mean, what it boils down to is what is really your P99 or P99.9 really requirement, right? Because a lot of people, they are developing the Java, just plain Java Lambda function. They spin it up and they said, okay, that takes 3 seconds. Wow, that's too slow, right? For example. But yeah, I mean, as you said, once this Lambda is warm, right? I mean, it can handle the request much faster, right? There's a couple of milliseconds, so similar to what you experience in a container. So you really need to understand this cold start concept. And I mean, with SnapStart also, obviously, things changed a lot in the optimization space, because a lot of things that you optimize to get like another second and another second basically got solved with SnapStart. So I'm not sure if I think you probably discussed SnapStart here already, but yeah, essentially what it does, it initializes your function already during deploy time, and it creates a snapshot of it. So it calls all the constructors, everything in the beginning, then takes a snapshot of the whole micro VM. And when the first request comes, it doesn't need to initialize everything again. It doesn't need to download your code, do some initialization, but it just restores the snapshot, right? And I mean, that obviously also for frameworks that come with a bit of overhead, even make them much more faster.
Yeah, and what I wanted just to add to this is to the listeners, what I really appreciate is SnapStart from AWS is based on crytec, and this is coordinate restored at checkpoint. I think a checkpoint. I always wanted to say coordinated resource at checkpoint, but this is restore, and this is an OpenJDK functionality where it is able to freeze an JVM version and on disk and start faster. And the incredible work from AWS is that what you did is you basically distributing, the binary image in availability zone and encrypting this and reconstructing this, so this is really fast. But I would say SnapStart makes GraalVM even less interesting, because with SnapStart you get, I would say the startup time is half as it was before. And this is no implication at the running application. And what's funny is if you try it, you have to look to CloudWatch and see what happens, because I think your Lambda is started 4 times or something. They started optimized and started, and then it's done.
Yeah, because they create a snapshot essentially per availability zone. That's usually why you see multiple initializations.
I didn't know that. This is interesting.
So the thing is, what you need to so. We leverage the crytec project by that we use the crytec library to implement the hooks to coordinate the actual process. So before a snapshot is taken, right, you could implement some kind of logic, for example, to shut down some connections that you don't want to have in a snapshot. And even after you restore, then you can implement some code. And there we leverage this crytec library, so to say. But the snapshotting technology actually is based on the micro VM, on the firecracker level, so to say. Right?
Oh, so interesting. So it's even deeper.
Different. So it snapshots the whole micro VM, right, rather than it's specifically.
That's even better than I thought. So what I thought, only the JVM is now serialized, but it's the entire stack.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, this is even more interesting. What I didn't knew, I always ask myself, why does it several times, and it does it once per availability zone.
Yeah, exactly. So it creates multiple snapshots. So you see that in the beginning, right? It's quite clear in the CloudWatch logs that you have multiple lines, and that's why they do that. The thing with GraalVM here is still, and I mean, you had an interesting point on that, but the thing with GraalVM is, of course, still the memory consumption, right? Because GraalVM first addresses, of course, the fast startup, right? And but also the memory consumption, right? So you can get the memory consumption way more down, right, than a traditional JVM application. But what you mentioned is also, but you need this amount of RAM anyway, because you need the CPU, right?
Exactly.
Then for this specific project, it might not make sense. But if you really want to get down on a memory where CPU is not that critical, you can go with GraalVM. You can reduce the memory consumption quite a lot, right?
Because even if you go on Fargate, you cannot have a lot of CPUs with no memory. you always have to add the memory. And if you have like one CPU or two CPU, I forgot the table, but if you would like to have 2-core container, you have to buy enough memory, and with that memory, Quarkus is perfectly happy, without GraalVM. What I can think about is if you have a function, an asynchronous function without a framework, and it then the performance doesn't make. But the problem is there's the how it's called, the Power project on GitHub, where you can measure
power tools.
Power
tuning.
Power tuning, where they're running your lambdas with different settings, and it turned out the one CPU is the most cost effective for Java. So I would say I would assume even an asynchronous lambda would run the best with a little bit more memory to be cost effective. So, but maybe an EC2 machine, right? So if you have an EC2 machine, a workload in Java, then GraalVM makes absolute sense, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that just come to mind also from the SnapStart is not only from a performance perspective, right? Because you can actually do some quite cool things, and we also have a module in the workshop that shows that. Because what it allows you to do, so imagine you have like a function that downloads some kind of data in the beginning, like some kind of validation file from S3 that it later then on the handler does some calculations. What you can do now is you can actually download that file and include it in the snapshot, right? So you do not actually on first startup on the first handler. You need to retrieve something from S3. It's already in the snapshot, right? So you can really cache some data in there. I mean, obviously, there is a caveat. If that data gets stale, you would need to create a new snapshot, right? So if that's outdated, at some point, you would need to retrigger the pipeline to essentially build a new snapshot because the data might be outdated in there.
But this is fine. What we did back then is, with microprofile and application servers, we did in PostConstruct. So it started in PostConstruct. We went to the database. This was on startup. So we had like a startup annotation. So we still have it on microprofile. And for that, this is even better because it does it once and never again. You're right. You have to redeploy it, but we can change environment entry, for instance.
Yes.
And it will happen automatically. But we could actually use it in my current project. So we're just waiting for Java 17 to have it, because right now I'm running Java 11 with Java 17 layer from Mark sales. So it was great. So we started a project 1 year ago, and we get Java 17 or Lambda from beginning with the hope Java 17 will come soon. But we're waiting and nothing happens.
Yeah, and it's good that you call it out, because actually I can announce here today that we're currently in the process of deploying the Java 17 version for Lambda. So I'm not sure when we're exactly publishing this year, but by that time it should be available already. So we will announce it as soon as it's ready. So the waiting should be finally be over, and you can leverage new Java 17 then also for your lambdas.
And you know that whether Java 17 will support SnapStart?
Yes, it does.
This is incredible.
Yeah,
this is the best news ever. So I should stop the podcast, and I should already, start migrating right now.
Yeah, as soon as we got the announcement, at least. Yeah.
Any other features with Java 17, or is it just Java 17? I mean, performance-wise, or how it looks like? Is it like very comparable with Java 11, or?
I think you need to do your own benchmarks for your specific applications there. I think in the announcement post we'll include some options that might be there by default now, but this is something we will see at release how it will be implemented. But yeah, I mean, I'm really looking much forward also now on the Java 17 language features that we can finally use, right? Thinking of records or sealed classes, for example, things like that. So that would be great. I mean, it has been highly asked, and finally we are almost there, so to say.
Yeah, this is now the message to Jeff Bezos, right? So we need as soon as possible Java support, right? So it took way too long with Java 11. It was actually,
Yeah, I mean, we took the feedback seriously, and we're constantly improving there. So
I mean, feedback seriously. If you have Java 11 and there's next LTS, it has to be immediately there. This is so. Jeff Bezos, please give Max more resources, to maintain. Hey Max, and are you still coding Java, or you are more? are you also involved, let's say, in the AWS Lambda runtime or Snaps, or you are just building the examples, or just, I mean, because
I'm not.
how you know the internal stuff, how SnapStart works, for instance.
Yeah, so I'm not an SDE, so I'm not involved in like the actual service development. But since I'm specialized on the technologies, we also exchange obviously with the service team here and there, and we talk to the PMs and we do some internal testing then obviously, and there I get a lot of hands-on, right, and try to combine that then in this reusable resources for the field, so this, as the workshops and blog posts and stuff like that. So I try to code as much as I can still, and I do it in Java. I used a lot of Kotlin before in my recent jobs, but nowadays I do plain Java now for the Lambda development as well.
This is actually what I am doing. Great that I found someone who has a similar mindset, because if you have Java 17, it is really incredible what's there. Of course, languages on top of JVM will be always more capable. But for instance, in my eyes, language like Kotlin, Scala, whatever, it should be twice as good as Java, to make an impact. If this is just a little bit, some features I'm not interested. And stuff like what I don't at all like at all, for instance, if you have a Maven with Java and you would like to run Kotlin, you need also the Kotlin dependencies in your thing to make it work. And if I would use it on Lambda, it would complicate things a bit, right? You have to think always about this dependency. And this is what also I'm just happy with Java. And if I would not do Java, I would do probably Rust, I would say, because it's the most interesting language, which is not Java right now, because it comes with strange concepts. And why not to learn something completely different, right? So this is back then I wanted to learn more, Ruby. I never managed because I got so many Java projects. But this was always my idea. If Java will die, I will not do JRuby. I will just take a look at the real Ruby, real Python, no Jython. Why not to learn the real thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, there are a few things still that I miss from my Kotlin days here and there, but I mean,
what are you missing? I'm interested. So what you're really missing in Java?
I mean, obviously now with Java 17, there are a lot of things that I missed are now finally there, right? Like records, which is like, I'm not sure if you can really compare, but data classes, right, in Kotlin, and then also sealed classes I used quite a lot.
For what on Kotlin? For what you use the sealed classes?
Sealed classes, I used it for simple response error handling. I really like that a lot. So if you think about it, you have like a service response class, and it can either be a success or it can contain an error. And then I have basically two implementations, a success, which contains the result, or an error with the error message and something on it. And then in the controller, for example, I can do a switch case right on the response, and I can say if it is an error, I throw a 400 something error. If it's success, I return response body, something like that. So I really liked it for this error handling kind of setup. And so what I miss is maybe some of the convenience methods. So I haven't really dove deep a lot into the record development recently, but I remember that I used quite a lot the copy. There was a convenience method on data classes so that you can say .copy, and then you can change a variable, and you got a new instance of this class with that new variable. So
not available in records right now.
Yeah, exactly. So this is something that I really miss because I used that quite a lot. And I think that was one feature. And I think so data classes used to work with like JPA and Hibernate, right? But the records don't, as far as I got, right? And then I'm basically the records then I use for DTOs or some POJOs that I get from the request, but I cannot leverage them for an entity that I create most of the time, which is for like a database.
The funny thing is, I didn't use JPA for 2 years, I think. I really like it because I'm really a Java fanboy. And the reason being is because of, clouds. If you are in the cloud, what's changed maybe, right? So if you are on premise, everything is serverless, really. I tell you why. There is a department, and this department runs the database for you. You don't care. You just you get the database, you get the connection, and how many CPUs or whatever, it doesn't cost you anything, you just use it. Then you have another department who care about my application servers. So I created my war, copied it over, and I was done. This was serverless. I was never interested in the particular implementation of the application servers. Now I go to the cloud, and to the nasty clouds, and now I have to do everything by myself. So and now the option is whether I will set up Postgres by myself with backup, maintenance windows, backup windows, and the active passive, or I pick DynamoDB or S3. And what happens right now, I just running on S3 and DynamoDB with Java. And then if you have this, first, it is more cost effective because S3 is incredibly cheap and DynamoDB depends on your usage. But and S3 has the latency is not as great, and Dynamo has low latency, but yeah, it's not S3. But
how do you do that then for, it's not like DynamoDB is not like a drop-in replacement, right? For like a traditional relational
yeah, this is what I
database.
wanted to tell you.
Yeah,
So this DynamoDB to be efficient requires complete different design. It's called single table design.
Yes.
So you have to rethink anyway. And if I rethink it, JPA makes less sense. There are the document classes, I think. It looks almost like JPA with DynamoDB. So if you use this, something different, we never use that because you have to, you have to think more what you are doing. And then if you just store JSON or create, a small abstraction in Java, you are basically done. And S3 is even simpler because S3 for us is a hash map. So we have a map and there is a DAO-like class and we are done. So I would say the change is this is mostly driven by economics, and I don't like to spend 1 week to set up Postgres and care about that and snapshots, backups, and restores. And so I would say serverless for me as a Java developer means if I go to the cloud, I would like to improve my situation. And to improve my situation, I should be able to give a developer an account and create a complete environment which is identical to production. This is my requirement to the cloud because anything else I had already on premise. And to achieve that means I only can use managed services. I mean, Kinesis, SNS, SQS, EventBridge. As long as you do go this way, the cool story is I can provision with CDK everything. I can have complete environment with CDK. But if I use Postgres or Kafka or something different, I have the problem. I cannot create topic with CDK. I cannot create a Postgres table with CDK. There is a gap, and cost. It's also cost effective, to use the managed service to a point. It really depends, about the traffic. But this is what I'm doing right now, and this is like extreme serverless with Java, and I can tell you with CDK it works really well.
Yeah, I mean, two points on this. So the first one obviously is what's really great about this, for example, DynamoDB use case is that you have the SDK, right? And you can also rely on IAM to do like certain permission handling, right? Which you do not have like out of the box for a plain JDBC connection.
Yeah, for plain JDBC, Max, what you will have to do is you have to install a plugin to Postgres, use RDS proxy, and create on the other side, like the Postgres knows the user. So you have to do some work. It is not, I would say, it is not hard. You have to do some plumbing, and this is for me not cloud native. Cloud native means give me the API, I provision the table. Second later, I have the table with all the permissions.
Yeah, I mean, and the second one, obviously, I saw you talk around the persistence in serverless applications, I think, and there you also mentioned two interesting points. The first one was, of course, connection pooling is now a lot different on Lambda because you have just a single invocation, so you don't. I think the default connection pool in Spring is like Hakari connection pool that starts 10 connections by default, and if you create 100 lambdas with 10 connections to the database, it will be quickly overwhelmed. So you need to be careful with the connection handling. And the second thing you also mentioned back then, I mean, in an ideal world, right, eventually we would have maybe also API-based access for relational databases. In our Aurora Serverless V1, we had the data API, which then allows you to leverage also the IAM mechanism because then the access will be API-based, right? So I think there's interesting developments around there, but
there's not available in V2 yet. I think. No. But maybe to the listeners, because it is obvious, but no one thinks about that. So for me, cloud native means everything is available via the same HTTP API, AWS one, right? So if you go Postgres route, then I have to use JDBC socket, which goes, outside. I would say it is in AWS network, but AWS does nothing about the traffic there. So if I go Kafka, the same. But if I send an Kinesis, SNS or SQS message, I'm using the AWS SDK and I'm issuing behind the scenes an HTTP request. And because it is an HTTP request, AWS has the possibility to check the IAM roles, or not possibility, they do it, right?
Yes.
You have to do it. So it means if you're using HTTP, the official SDK from AWS, everything is secured with IAM.
Yes.
If you're leaving this path and you're going, with JDBC, Kafka, or whatever other open source tool you are using, AWS cannot, look into your binary protocol and do some IAM checks.
Yeah.
And this is a big deal in my project, security and also the provisioning. And the next one is, of course, table. You cannot just create table with CDK in Postgres.
Yeah, but you could leverage things like Flyway, for example, right? That your application
Plumbing, Max. I would like
Yeah.
to focus on my business. What I did, this is you can do this. I don't say it's not possible, but the question is, if I go to the cloud, I would like to improve my situation. And what is the improvement? I just focus fully on business, and let's cloud do the thing, right? So this is why I don't get lift and shift for just for fun. If you have a use case, just do it. But it is not like cloud native. I was in a workshop with my client, and they say, okay, cloud native. Do we need Kubernetes for cloud native? I say, why? It runs on your machine. If you run it on the cloud, there is no difference. If you have to improve, the situation. And I think the next logical step is, or next is already there, is serverless, because you fully focus, on your stuff and not on the plumbing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you also think about the integration between the components, right? You talked about, for example, this async invoke, for example, or how you can integrate a Lambda function with SQS, right? Think about if you were initially reading something from a queue, from a container kind of environment, right? You need to have like the client that actually does the polling and all those kind of things. And here I just say Lambda do SQS, and I have automatic polling, retries, DLQs, everything out of the box. So it saves me a huge effort from a development perspective. So when I really got to Lambda at the first time, for me personally, it was seeing also Kubernetes and everything before. For me personally, it was, okay, this is really how I, as a developer, want to develop applications, right? For me, that was like, okay, this is the route, this is the future, at least for me. And that's why I'm really passionate about this topic. And hopefully we can spread the word even more and share like best practices. And
Yeah, the best practice was, if you go to the cloud, use the cloud, right? I mean, and maybe also not obvious, right? I think the last thing is in serverless. If you do security in Java, eService, Quarkus, whatever, outside the cloud, what usually happens, the OpenID Connect flow is implemented inside the application, because you hit the Quarkus, it goes, to somewhere, keycloak, and gets, the token back. And in the cloud, you can do this, but what you should do is instead, this is the job of API gateway or load balancer, for instance, to do the flow. So what it means is you don't have to configure your application, you just get, the valid token and do something with it. And there are small things where you have to, rethink how it works, because otherwise you're paying for the cloud and they are not using the features. So this is the worst possible outcome, actually. You are picking, your legacy application, going to the cloud, and there is absolutely no improvement. I would say, but you should improve the situation and make it worse. So this was why I think this is the only way to go. Otherwise, there are other reasons why you go to the cloud, but not, using the cloud. Great. So interesting that you are working similar area. I think we will talk 1 hour about SAM, but it was more interesting than this.
Great.
And
we should.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Where people can find you on the internet, and we will add all your workshops to the show notes. But you can maybe mention them right now. Your Twitter account, your AWS work, or whatever you like to mention.
Yeah. So on Twitter, I am called Mesh Network. I just started there because Mark basically said, I need to do more on Twitter, and he wants to ping me.
Is Mark your boss?
No. We're just working closely together on the Java topics, and he said you should do more on Twitter. So I just started out there. So you can follow me there. We will post interesting updates for Java. You can also find me on LinkedIn, and we will include here the Java resources on the show notes. But if you look for Java on AWS Lambda workshop, a simple search, then you will definitely find that.
Java on AWS workshop. Okay, and everyone has to follow Max now to get more followers than Mark.
That will be hard, but
Okay.
awesome.
Greetings to Mark and thank you.
Yeah.
It was nice
Thank you, Adam.
conversation.
Very nice. Thanks a lot.